Welcome to PianoInspires podcast, celebrating pianists, teachers, and innovators as they share their inspiring stories about the transformative power of music.
Are you passionate about piano and keyboard education? Then mark your calendars for an event that's set to elevate your teaching skills to new heights. The National Conference for Keyboard Pedagogy is back, and it's bigger and better than ever. Join us for our online conference on June 7 and 8, 2025, and our in-person conference, July 23 to 26, 2025, in Lombard, Illinois, for an unforgettable gathering of educators, performers, and industry experts. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this conference offers something for everyone. Dive into workshops led by renowned instructors, discover cutting-edge teaching techniques, and connect with like-minded individuals who share your love for music education. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to learn, grow, and be inspired. For more information, visit nckp2025.com today.
Welcome to PianoInspires podcast. I'm Jennifer Snow. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Francis Clark Center, and I am thrilled to be joined by the extraordinary concert artist and teacher, Spencer Myer. Welcome, Spencer. Spencer has an extraordinary performance career. I mean, the bio goes on of all these amazing orchestras all over the world and recitals and collaborations. It's so fascinating that your career was really launched with three important piano competitions.
Yes.
Your first prize in the 2004 UNISA International Piano Competition in South Africa, the 2006 Christel DeHaan Classical Fellowship from the American Pianist Association, and the gold medal from the 2008 New Orleans International Piano Competition. I'm looking forward to talking to you about some of these great experiences. In addition to your extraordinary pianism and artistry, you are a renowned teacher and advocate for piano teaching and piano teachers. You're currently Associate Professor of Piano at the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. And previously, you've served as guest faculty at the Oberlin and Baldwin Wallace Conservatories of Music, and you were a member of the piano faculty at Boston's Longy School of Music of Bard College from 2016 to 2022. It is my great honor and joy to welcome you today to PianoInspires podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Amazing to be here.
Well, we love to start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so can you take us back to your initial memories of music and music making?
Yeah, absolutely. The music comes from really both sides of my family, but especially from my dad's. So my dad, professionally all of my life, he was an engineer, but his first degree was in music. He went to American University in DC when they had one of the only classical guitar programs east of the Mississippi, and got a guitar degree, guitar and theory and composition, I think was the combo. And so, until I came along, really, and he realized that playing guitar in bars was not really going to support a family, and he went back and got an engineering degree. But until then, he was an actively practicing musician. So I remember a lot of music in the house. He would play his guitar. We had a piano that my mom had inherited from her family, but a lot of playing his guitar and a lot of singing. And I remember in particular, we have a reel-to-reel tape of me and him singing with the guitar and doing all of the Peter and the Wolf themes. And I had them all from memory by about 3. So I would never consider myself a prodigy, but the ear and the talent was always clearly there, and the love for music was there. And I remember playing the main bass notes of the Bach C major prelude, and he would play the other notes on the piano. And so there was a lot of interactive music activity with my dad in particular. And so I think when I was 6 years old, I was actually standing in line with my mom to sign up for the baseball team, the T-ball team. And I tugged on her sleeve and he said, "You know what I really want to do is take piano lessons."
Oh, isn't that a great story?
Yeah. So I did play baseball for 2 years, but we went right and signed up for piano lessons with a woman who taught locally in her basement. And my mom was a nurse, and one of her colleagues had a child who was studying with this woman, and she was terrific. She was a Cleveland Institute grad, and she was my teacher for 10 years.
And what's her name?
So her name is Corin Mino. When I studied with her, she was Corin Cleve. and just really, really great. She had grown up with a father on Long Island who was a concert pianist, and he was trained by a Russian teacher. So there was a lot of emphasis that trickled down through her on sound production, deep tone. Did a lot of scales and arpeggios with me for technical development, and just a really wonderful mentor. And she would have weekly theory classes for her students. So I got a lot of really solid foundation in those areas as well from her. So that was great. But yeah, I think it was really my dad was the first big influence, and he had a lot of classical records as well. I remember in particular the Tchaikovsky Van Cliburn platinum selling record. He played a lot, so that was Van Cliburn was certainly a big influence on me, and being an American pianist, of course. So yeah, I think I reached a point after a couple years of lessons where it got a little difficult, and they had to push me just a little bit. But by and large, I was always interested in it and loved to practice. Did a half hour to an hour a day at the start. And then when I reached junior high, we got a new piano. That was a big turning point for me. Huge turning point, because the piano I've really outgrown. So to finally have an instrument that was really responding just ignited the excitement in me. So then I was practicing more hours a day. And when I began high school, around age 14, I think I had been talking about being a lawyer or a doctor or something that would make money, just a sort of a logical choice for an aspiring youth. And it was actually my parents that at that point sat me down and they said, music is all you ever think about and all you ever talk about. Maybe you should think about doing this for a career. And at that point, my dad and I had started to go very seriously to the Cleveland Orchestra. Every time they would have a soloist, we would get front row seats, and I would watch the soloists doing their thing. But I never, until that conversation with my parents, I never put it together that was their job.
Oh, wow.
And when that switch flipped in my brain, then there was no turning back. And I think at that point, I still didn't realize really what was involved. But that was the switch flipping that made me realize I want my life to be in music. And then I went to my piano lesson and talked to my teacher about it. And she said advice that I think a lot of teachers give to their students. You should only be a music major if you can't imagine doing anything else.
Exactly.
And it was really that, I think that really kept me fueled from that point on, with the mentality of, I just want to have my hands on the piano, or I just want to be involved in music. So whether that is teaching a piano lesson, playing an audition for a singer, playing at a retirement home, playing in a big hall, playing a concerto with orchestra, playing a solo thing, chamber music, whatever, it all makes me happy, and has always all made me happy.
Yeah.
So,
Music.
Music. Yep. So, and I encourage that with my students too. You have to maintain an open mind and let hopefully your complete love for music be your driving force. So playing concertos every year with New York Philharmonic is not the definition of success. It has to be broad, and it has to be fueled at the core by a deep love for music.
And I love that idea of self-actualization through the whole breadth of what music can bring your life, and being open to that. Because I think people can see a very narrow path and think that that's the definition of success, as opposed to who are you and how do you relate to music, and how does music inspire you through life? And how does that sort of manifest? And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Can I touch on something a little thread you mentioned? I'm very curious about this. You have this sort of, inspiring vision for yourself at a very young age. But there was that time you mentioned that you weren't sure. You were sort of, probably those teenage years where you were coming into that age where, is this what I want to do? You still hadn't seen it to be it yet. What was that time like for you? Was it relating to having to practice a lot, or was it that you were trying to find yourself socially? Was it you had other interests?
I think it was more that I grew up in suburban Cleveland with a pretty normal childhood, in that I wasn't in a sort of a young artist program in a performing arts high school. So the mentality of lots of peers around me who are aiming for a career in music was not there. Sure. So it just didn't enter my brain that was an option. But I don't think I was ever in denial of my love for music and how much I wanted to be immersed in it. I was in choir in school, and I was in band for a couple of years. but always in choir, always accompanying my friends, always just my life completely was music. And I enjoyed my classes too. I enjoyed math and things, and I excelled at school. But music was the focal point of my life. But I just never put it together until, again, I had that conversation with my parents that I could do it as a career, or that it was something that was done as a career. Not that I couldn't do it, but it just didn't enter my mind.
And what's amazing, so beautiful when you speak about this, is your curiosity. You're like a seeker.
Yeah.
So even as you were loving music and living that wonderful world of music that we lived in, where we live in, you were seeking. You were seeking others. You were seeking community. You were seeking, how does this work? How is this going to be? And when we're young like that, we're not aware.
Yeah.
So that moment, that things clicked for you.
Yes.
And you started to think about, that's my identity.
Yes.
That's the way I want to go. Where did that take you?
Well, that took me then. It's interesting. It took me into a state of thinking where I became even more and more focused on how I wanted to excel at music and how much I loved it. And at that point, I do remember around the beginning of high school starting to feel a little bit out of place. I always felt out of place being in classical music, and I was made fun of in school and whatever, and there was a lot of that. Always felt a little out of place because I was the only one involved as deeply as I was. But certainly at that point, when I really decided that was what I wanted to do, then I started to be a little bit lost in that sense of connecting with peers. So the first music camp that I attended was the Baldwin Wallace Summer Music Clinic.
Okay.
My second year of high school, summer after second year of high school, total life changer, complete life changer, to finally meet other kids my age.
Find your
who
people.
who they were my people,
Yeah.
who were that passionate about it. So I attended that summer clinic for 2 summers. And then the final summer, right before I went to Oberlin for undergrad, I went to Marvin's Goshen College Piano Workshop.
We have to talk about that.
We have to talk about that.
Yes.
Another game changer.
I know.
Truly.
I want to
Just-
just say that you just spoke to something that I think a lot of young people and people in general face.
Yeah.
When I often say, we don't choose music, music chooses us.
Yeah.
And aren't we blessed for that? And aren't we lucky that we pursue this life in service to something so
Right.
powerful
Yeah.
as the transformative power of music?
Yeah.
That feeling of isolation.
Yes.
That music kind of sustained you through that difficult time
Mhm.
until you realized there was a whole world
Yes.
of peers
Exactly.
who felt that way you did, that were pursuing music the way you
Yes.
were pursuing music.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly growing up in the United States, where classical music is a little more of a niche thing. It's not as much in the mainstream as it is maybe in Europe and Asia. So I think a lot of us grew up feeling a little out of place until we find that niche community. And of course, we're working all our lives to expand and expose classical music to everybody, because we want everybody to love it as much as us. But there's a select group of us that are into it. And so finding them is important.
And I would say that those traumatic experiences in high school, those personal experiences, have made you, you have such a capacity for people and empathy, which is probably one of the core things about being an effective teacher.
I think so. Oh, yeah.
And your
Absolutely.
humanity stems from those struggles.
Yeah.
And knowing that music is your power, your
absolutely.
superpower.
Absolutely. That, and my mom is a therapist. So. She was a nurse for 20 years, and then she went back to school, and she's a therapist. So
That helped.
definitely, and I think probably if I hadn't gone into music, psychology would be something I would have pursued.
Well,
I think
as
it's
we
just,
say, it's 90% in piano teaching,
Absolutely.
90% psychology,
Oh,
or more.
absolutely. Yes.
especially at university level.
Yes.
It really is, because you're dealing with people at a big transition in their lives.
Oh, for sure. Mhm.
That is so wonderful. Could you speak to the impact of Marvin? So you had this incredible experience at the summer camp. You found your people.
Yeah.
You were, amplifying your love and passion for your life path. And now you really know.
Yes.
Now the seeker is like, I'm on my journey.
Yeah. Particularly Marvin's Goshen College workshop was the first piano-centric thing that I had done. So the Baldwin Wallace thing that I had mentioned before was all instruments connected. It was still great to connect with all instruments, but to then be around people who were just so crazy about piano, just a whole group of people crazy about piano, and to meet this just inspiring personality who is as passionate about music and piano and people and giving as I was. I think I always connected better with adults, but here was a great adult figure that I related to and connected to so deeply that and was frankly making the kind of life that I wanted. I mean, he played that summer so beautifully, and he was teaching, and just so many great stimulating conversations, and just watching him be as a person just was really, really inspiring. And by that time I was on my way to Oberlin for undergrad. And so I knew that was kind of my next chapter. And it was just, so it made the transition so just rewarding and inspiring.
And what an incredible, time in your life to intersect with someone like Marvin Blickenstaff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That critical
Absolutely,
time
yeah.
of questioning and knowing in your heart, but just that sort of that luft,
Yes.
that wind that kind of
Absolutely, yes.
takes you up, and all of a sudden you realize, this is bigger than me, and I'm
And
on
this
something.
is the right decision for me. Yes.
And
yes.
he went to Oberlin.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I would imagine your time at Oberlin was very important. I mean, were you keen at that time to think? How did you think about developing your artistry? Were you thinking about it from the lens of, I have to go through all these competitions, and I have to make, there's sort of what I would call the business side, the awareness side.
Yeah.
Was it a combination of developing your artistry and using competitions as vehicles for that?
Yeah.
And how would you sort of frame that, knowing how many young musicians look at you and say, I want to be him, just like you saw soloists with the Cleveland Orchestra.
Yes.
They're like, I want to be Spencer.
Exactly.
So how did he do this?
I think it was a combination of so many of the things you mentioned in that, and that was nurtured by Oberlin, which is a very, I think, balanced environment, certainly for undergrad. I felt so encouraged in so many different areas, particularly collaborative piano, which has been a giant part of my life, to explore all these things and really find my voice. So I think during those 4 years, I also approached my career trajectory with a very rounded sense, in that I knew I had to start doing competitions at some point, but I didn't feel pressured to do it right now. But I knew I had to do it at some point. I knew I had to learn a bunch of repertoire, solo and concertos. So I was really pushing myself to crank out a lot of repertoire, but knew at the same time that I didn't need it right now. I was sort of planning long-term for something abstract off in the future that I wasn't totally aware of what was completely needed, but I kind of knew these core things. So this just sort of rounded sense of approach to the career that was not based in pressure. And that was also the feeling that I felt at Oberlin, that there was pressure to excel, because it's a high level school and all my peers were doing so well, but not in the sense that that my career must be starting now. And I think that was very healthy as well. And I actually wanted to go to Juilliard for undergrad, and I didn't get in. And it was really the best thing that happened to me. I loved going there for grad school. I adore New York. I had such a great time at Juilliard for grad school, but Oberlin was an amazing, well-rounded place for me to really find myself as a person and a musician and a pianist.
And who are your most influential mentors while you were at Oberlin? Who are the people that really, took you from being this wonderfully gifted young pianist full of love and excitement, and starting to deepen? What were some of those big discoveries you made artistically and musically as you started to deepen into being a musician fully?
I think it was so many of the faculty. I was very lucky piano-wise that my first teacher was Joseph Schwartz, and he retired after my second year, actually. So then I got to have Peter Takacs for 2 years.
Okay.
So 2 years with two very different approaches. Joe Schwartz studied with Levine, so it was all about sound and line, and Peter studied with Fleischer, so it was much more. He's extremely, extremely musical and expressive. So it was sort of the Fleischer logic and intellect combined with Peter's just great natural expression and spontaneity. And so about things about structure and creating shapes that make sense. So it was two wonderful approaches to have for 2 years each. But I played for a ton of singers, so I would have to credit all of the voice faculty that I played for with really shaping how lines are made and how sound is produced through the voice, which is what we're always trying to imitate at the piano. the accompanying faculty as well, the collaborative faculty I worked with a lot and learned so much from. So and the instrumental faculty, because I played for a lot of instrumentalists as well. Just everybody kind of gaining little bits and pieces from everybody.
And I love that you go into your undergrad experience with this vision for yourself in which you just said yes to everything.
Yes,
You know-
truly did.
You
Had
know,
to
it's
learn how to
kind-
say no. Yes.
And like, oh, the
Yeah.
vocal repertoire, and oh, I learned so much there, and oh, it's
Mhm.
so beautiful. And then,
Yeah.
oh, and then my piano lessons, because we often find with young people that they're very focused on their solo piano study.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the idea that they would be branching out into other
Mhm.
collaborations can be quite daunting.
Yeah.
When
yeah.
in essence, that is kind of the fabric of who you are as an
Absolutely,
artist
yeah.
holistically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Collaborative
For sure.
artist.
It informs so much of what we do at the piano as a soloist. Yeah. Really everything.
The seeker,
yeah.
seeking new repertoire,
Yeah.
seeking new collaborators,
Yes.
seeking new people.
Exactly.
It's
yeah.
just wonderful. And so
Yeah.
you performed a lot because you weren't only
Yeah.
performing what was required of you in your solo
Yeah.
class, but also with all these amazing
Collaborating
colleagues.
all the time. Yeah. Yeah. And still am. It's still such a huge part of my life. And I really encourage my students that these are the colleagues that you're going to have in the future. It's so fun. The repertoire is so fun.
Yes.
You learn so much about your own
Mhm.
playing. There's just there's so much to be gained from collaborating as much as you can. And I think, it's certainly for those that are not as adept at learning music quickly yet, it's a little daunting sometimes. Certainly at IU, it's all the pianists collaborate and have a bit of a collaborative requirement, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. But I tell them how important it is and how it will really be at least 50% of your work.
You do have to pay the rent.
Absolutely. And everybody needs a pianist.
They
So,
do.
Yeah. But so fun. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so satisfying to connect with somebody without words. I
Yes.
mean,
Deep.
and obviously singers use words, but it's connecting with sound and speaking to each other through your sound.
And
just-
instinct.
Yeah. Yes.
Not,
yes.
you're connecting through the instinctual
Totally.
response
totally.
to sound and moment and
Yeah.
emotional response.
Yeah.
This is so inspiring because I think we often see a lot of siloing in the
Mhm.
piano world,
Yeah, we do.
and how that's not a reflection of what it is to be a pianist.
Yeah. At all.
And how important it is for emerging pianists and
Mhm.
young musicians to have a mentor and a teacher and a role model who is not only, encouraging that, exemplifying it, but championing it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
really making them feel like, oh yes, this is actually as or more important depending on what you like to do.
Yep.
And actually
Yeah.
connecting them very early on to what
Mhm.
it is to be in the music world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. Yeah. And again, feeds so many things in their own personal growth as musicians. So yeah, I find it very important.
So then the next corner
Yeah.
on the seeker's path is New York City.
Yes.
And was that something in your starry eyes thinking, well, I didn't get in originally. I love it
Bingo.
here,
Yeah.
but I'm going for it.
I gotta get to New York. Yes, that was my goal. Yeah. So I auditioned for Juilliard and I got in, and studied for 2 years with Julian Martin, who was
Oh.
really just one of my best mentors. Such a great mind, and just an amazing guy. Very fatherly to his students, and just created a great atmosphere in the studio, and just everything about him just incredible. And I adored being at Juilliard. I was very much, I think at Oberlin, the level is so high, but I was a little bit of a big fish. And I was popular because of everything I was doing, and I collaborated so much with everybody and whatnot. So I was ready to be a small fish. I knew I
Mhm.
had to be a small fish. I was very ready for that, ready for a big city, and just had a blast. And was so inspired by the musicians, my fellow colleagues at Juilliard, and the drama students and the dance students. There's just so much oozing talent there. So, and to be, of course, immersed in New York as well, the atmosphere in New York, and any concert at your fingertips, and the opera and the symphony and everything. Just quite an amazing time. And that was when I started to really think more seriously about this is how I'm going to execute my career path, namely with competitions. So that was when I started to really do competitions, or at least apply to competitions seriously. There were, I think, I can't remember the number, but a lot that I applied for in my 2 years of master's, where I was still refining things and figuring things out that I didn't get into. And a couple that I did get into, I didn't pass the first round. So so after Juilliard, after 2 wonderful years, I stayed in New York and I did a doctorate at Stony Brook. So I commuted out there a couple days a week and was working on my doctorate. And at that point, I really started to buckle down and do seriously competitions, and was very immersed in them for probably about 6 or 7 years, I think, doing between 2 and 4 every year. And I mean, I learned so much. I mean, they're just, it's obviously we've all had conversations about competitions, and we recognize it's a very strange concept to be trying to decide the best artist in something that's so subjective. So they're a strange animal, but they are in a way a necessary evil, that they, give performance opportunities and financial support to young musicians in great ways. But I always talk with my students about how much I learned, especially from the ones that I didn't pass the first round. I made contacts, made lifelong friends, developed nerves of steel. I always tell them one experience I had in the William Capell competition in the finals. This was 2007 now, so I had been doing competitions for several years very seriously. And I did not always want to use the same repertoire. I was very determined to always be learning some new repertoire and include at least one new piece on a competition program every time. So this time my new piece was the Rachmaninoff Paganini Rhapsody in the finals.
Oh,
and
boy.
I got to the finals and had to play the Rachmaninoff Paganini Rhapsody with the Baltimore Symphony.
Goodness.
Had not worked on it with a teacher, had not played it through with a second piano. It was all a self project. So I can now play that really under any circumstances. I have never been more nervous, was just super hyper focused. So developing the nerves, I think the competition really provides a wonderful worst case scenario where you're playing for an audience, but there's a jury there judging every note you play. And so it's impossible to get out of the second guessing mentality where you're counting your mistakes on stage. And it's really, I feel really only the last competition I did, which was the Clyburn, was I able to finally feel that I'm just walking on stage and just playing a recital and being myself. So the nerves were very developed through that, and preparation.
Yes.
I developed so many of my certainly mental practice techniques because of that pressure to play more perfectly in a competition than you might have to in a performance. Developed so many of my practice techniques through my practice in competitions.
It's fascinating. You speak about competitions through the lens of creative process.
Yes.
And this idea of first, applying to them, you're not getting in, you're getting in here and there, you don't make it past the first round, learning, going back, learning, okay, what else? Hearing the people who are going forward.
Exactly.
And this sort of ongoing journey and creative process through the lens of what we call the strange animal of competition, but it's actually not about the competition for you.
Yes.
It was about the development, how you developed into a concert artist.
Yes.
Through the journey.
Yeah.
Of being in competitions.
Exactly. And I think I realized that pretty early on in my competition trajectory. And so that definitely kept me going, because it's hard to not take them to heart. So you have to develop that side of yourself. But I started to realize the benefits pretty early on. And that definitely kept me going. I'm glad to be done with them, of course. But those great elements that I was able to gain were so valuable and lifelong.
Can I connect something back to your family for a second?
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have 2 younger sisters, 2 amazing younger sisters.
Are they involved with music at all?
They're both very musical. The older of the 2, Sarah, was the marketing director of Indianapolis Symphony for quite a few years. And then the younger of the 2, Julia, is not in music anymore, but she has a musical theater degree from Michigan, which is one of the best programs in the country. So she's an amazing singer. And she has 2 little daughters right now, and she has a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old. And the 3-year-old is definitely matching pitch already and imitating rhythms. And there's definitely a strong musical ear there. So they're both musical, but I think they were never as 100% passionate about it as I was. But I think also it was maybe difficult to live in the shadow of their brother, who was
Right.
so immersed in it and doing well and just making such a life of it. So I think they both just kind of chose
Different
not
paths.
different paths. Yeah.
Well, because I'm curious about the family dynamic as you go through and you're winning all these competitions and you're becoming very well known and
Yeah.
you're pursuing this and you're the king of Oberlin and you go to Juilliard.
Yeah.
And I think about your father, who
Yeah.
was a musician, who chose to raise his family
Yeah.
and chose to become an engineer,
Right.
and how much joy it must bring your family
Yeah.
to see you self-actualize.
Yeah.
Knowing that when you were a tiny and you were singing all those themes from
Yes.
Peter and the Wolf,
Yes.
that your father recognizes this in you.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then to
yeah.
see that work ethic. I mean, did that work ethic come from home? Is it intrinsically just the way you are? Is it a combination of, so much of this you speak about is vision for self,
Yeah.
passion and love for music
Yeah.
in every way it can manifest for yourself.
Yeah.
And work and drive, relentless perseverance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Where
the
do you
work
get that?
the work and drive definitely comes from my parents.
Mhm.
But not in the way that I think they were in general, say, naive or uninformed about really how much a young pianist should be practicing necessarily. So they were never pushy in that way, except they wanted me to do my practicing every day, but never pushy in that way. So there was a work ethic that came from them as it pertains to life and all our pursuits in life. But the work ethic required for the career, I think I just developed over time as I realized with each passing year really how much is required. So my practice hours increased and my focus increased year by year, I think, sort of just on my own.
Yeah, that dream for yourself.
Yeah. But the work ethic idea was definitely there from my parents. Yeah. But I think it's, as you mentioned, I think it's admirable and wonderful and also remarkable for a father who decided to not do it because he couldn't support a family with a music career to then encourage his son in that direction. I'm always so touched and honored by that. And he is, both my parents, but especially my dad, the former musician, is so proud.
Yes, he must be just delighted.
Really, both my parents are so incredibly proud, but yeah.
Yeah, because he serves music in his life and he understands the power of music and it's the highest pursuit.
Yeah.
And he holds it there.
For sure.
Which when you think about that conversation of maybe I'll be a lawyer, maybe I'll do this or that. And they're like, well, no, because you could do music.
Yes.
And if you could do music, why would you choose anything else?
Exactly.
I mean, isn't that fabulous?
Yeah. And they, even long before that music conversation, their biggest advice to me always was follow your passion and the money will come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
And so you've gone through all these amazing successes with competitions and started to understand yourself as an artist. That all kind of starts to, clue up for yourself. You've got a career, you're performing, you've got your management and your Steinway artist, and you're on your way.
Yeah.
And where's the teaching pull? And when does that start to come in? And how does that all sort of come together for you?
Well, it was always something I was interested in, and I started teaching beginners when I was 12. So I had a paper route from age 9 to 12, and then I thought I could at least just advertise on my street for piano lessons and start teaching piano lessons. Why not make money doing music?
Yes.
So, and that was always something I very much enjoyed, and I did that through. Not as actively through college, but I did it through college. And then it stopped in grad school. I lost all my connections to developing students and I was more focused on playing through my graduate school. And then as the performing career started to develop and I would do various engagements, they would often come in the master class. So the bulk of my early higher level teaching post grad school was master classes, which I always really enjoyed. And I always found myself, I think, conducting a masterclass a little bit closer to a lesson than a public display. And I just kind of started to see that certainly in particular, voicing things about developing technique and refining technique and technical problems and solving things came quite easily to me because I think I was never a prodigy. And I had some natural technique, but I had to figure a lot of things out. There was a lot, certainly because a lot that I did naturally, I developed a lot of inherent tensions that I had to get rid of. And through repertoire exploration and just a lot of observation. There's another thing I was going to mention about influences at Oberlin was were the other piano faculty that I would observe their students playing. I would accompany a lot of their students on concertos, so I saw their teaching. So many of these different technical approaches. There's Bob Shannon and Haewon Song who teach the Taubman technique. We had a couple Russian teachers there who have their own approach as well. So I think gained a well-rounded sense of how to solve problems. And so I became very early on in this masterclass trajectory, very addicted to those light bulb moments with students where you solve a technical problem and you make something easier for them. And it's all they want is to be able to communicate themselves more easily at the piano. It is just the best feeling.
Indeed.
Absolutely the best feeling. So I think because I enjoyed teaching, I thought I'll get the doctorate. I might want to teach at a university down the road. I knew it wasn't something I wanted to do right away. So actually Stony Brook was a good choice for me because it's a bit more of a performance-oriented doctorate. So there wasn't a whole lot of academic work. And so I was able to not have to be on campus all the time. And I was able to get out and develop my performing career. But I was getting the doctorate at the same time, so I would have it. And I applied for a job now and then. I applied in my early years at mostly the really good places that would not take a first hire. I was just kind of just throwing my name out there. And so then I was in Cambridge playing a concert, and Wayman Chin, who was then the dean at Longy, had, I think one of his students was learning the Carl Vine Sonata, and he was looking it up online, and he found a performance I had on YouTube. And so he saw that I was in the area, and I was kind of on his radar. And so he said, can you come into Longy and do a masterclass? So I did a masterclass there, both for art song and also for solo piano. Had a wonderful day there, met Karen Zorn. So this was 2014. And they talked about a position that they had open. So the day progressed, and I was in Karen's office by the end of the day, having a great conversation with her about Longy and their new ideas and the direction they were going. So at that point, the job didn't pan out. And then I was, in the meantime, a finalist for Roosevelt University and Cal State Fullerton as well. And both of those jobs also didn't pan out. But shortly after that, Wayman called me again. And by then it was 2015 in the spring. And he said, we have a new position open recently that is actually a combination solo piano and collaborative piano.
Oh, perfect.
We want somebody who can do both and teach both. And we think you're perfect for it. So we would love you to apply. And we would start in the fall of 2016 because we want a year to advertise the person. And so that's how Longy came about.
And to think that Karen is also a student of Marvin's.
Of Marvin's. I
There's
know.
that other connecting,
full
the
circle.
links
Absolutely.
coming together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she and I connected on that right away,
Oh,
back
yeah.
from when I first went into her office. So that was great. So that was my first regular hour-to-hour teaching that I really did. I had some in the 10 years previously, aside from master classes, there was maybe a student that would come to me now and then for an hour lesson in New York. But that was the first really serious teaching, real student development over 2 years or 4 years that I was able to do, and just really fell in love with it to the point that where teaching had been very, very clearly secondary in my life up until then, it became equal to performing, just an equal passion. Again, those light bulb moments are for me so just really feed my soul. It's just amazing. So by about 5 or 6 years at Longy, everybody is adjunct at Longy. So it was definitely a full-time job. At my last year there, I had 15 students. So it felt full-time, but I was ready for a big tenure track position and to start putting my name out there. And then that's how IU came to be.
And are you happy?
Yeah, I'm so happy.
That's marvelous.
It's just incredible. It's heaven for the students. The facilities are amazing. Just what they can do, the operas, 5 different orchestras, a whole practice room building just for practice rooms. I mean, it's
Paradise.
paradise.
Marvelous.
Real paradise. And of course, they have a great history of performing faculty. So they're so encouraging of the faculty going off and performing, which is great. And the students, I think, are, as you said, very appreciative of learning by example and seeing their teacher going out and doing it and making a career with solo and collaborative and having to live out of a suitcase and have, all the things that go with a performing career, they're seeing by example, which is great. And so they are extremely understanding and flexible about rearranging lessons, and they just really go with the flow. And I love them all. Even the less advanced ones are so talented and really hardworking and responsive. And so it's been such a joy, and great colleagues, great environment. I love Bloomington. I did keep my place in New York, so I go back to New York when I can. But it's been an amazing 2 years so far.
That is so inspiring to hear you speak about this. I wanted to sort of ask you a question that takes us back into a time that was very challenging for artists.
Yeah.
But we got to know each other. It's funny during those times how you got to know people, you know of people, but then you got to know them better.
Yes.
And during COVID pandemic shutdown, you got very active. You certainly helped at the center and demonstrated that how important music was, how desperately people wanted music still at that time.
Absolutely.
Especially when you think about New York, you think about a performing career with orchestras and performing arts centers. What have you experienced post-pandemic about either the shift in the profession or perhaps with your students an awareness of what they maybe want to do in the world because they endured something at this critical age that made them realize that we certainly had never experienced before.
Yeah.
Wow, everything can change in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And things can look very different than what they looked like before.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience, sort of your takeaways from that extraordinary time into where we are now? How did you find music sort of sits in your life and the life of people all around you?
Yeah. Well, I think we all certainly were reminded what a soul feeding medium it is, and how much we need it, and how much we need live music, because we were so starved for being together and having live music. So I think certainly, as much as I would love my career to have included lots of engagements with the biggest orchestras in the world, I think the fact that my career has been largely the orchestras on the next level down and the recital series on the next level down was a window into how these communities and these boards and groups that support these organizations really stepped up to the plate. And these are thriving organizations now, really amazingly thriving organizations. So I feel lucky to have been a part of that. So my career per se and my performances, once we got back to live things, really didn't taper off so much.
The resilience of those communities.
Yeah.
And that's so fascinating because we think about sort of these iconic legacy organizations in our field of music and music performance.
Yeah.
And it really is the communities that pulled together and supported artists and smaller organizations that really flourished. I can say that for the Francis Clark Center. I mean, organizations that were able to respond.
Exactly.
And as a result, built new communities, supported their existing communities in ways that maybe other institutions that kind of shut the doors and just waited for it all to blow over.
Yeah.
And are struggling now for, audiences are struggling to innovate.
Absolutely.
And we saw a lot of that flexibility in a lot of organizations all over.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
It's inspiring. Yeah.
Now,
and certainly through teaching as well.
Yes.
I think the hunger to be together and to be reminded of what a soul feeding medium it is I haven't seen too much difference in the work ethic of the solo piano students and how much they value their in-person lessons. And I think we certainly saw a lot of changes in the younger generation who are maybe just starting college, for example, how they connect to others because of so much time away. And I think a lot of my colleagues who have classroom teaching have seen the effects of that. But I certainly, as a private piano teacher, have not seen that at all. My kids still put their phone down in their lesson. They still, when they're a piano major, they want to please their piano teacher first and foremost. They are the most committed to their piano lessons of everything they do. So, but I think that stems from, again, being starved for it.
Right. Perhaps we're entering a renaissance.
Yeah.
A renaissance of these
Yeah.
wonderful young people who had this experience at a formative time, who appreciate and recognize the absolute joy, back to your joy and passion and love, and how much you appreciate something. At a much younger age than probably they wouldn't have felt that way if it hadn't all been sort of snatched away at that time for them. I know we've been chatting about lots of things, but I'd love to ask you, at this point in your very accomplished career in all facets and your ongoing, just joyous, inspiring energy, you're such a beacon in our field. What inspires you? What are the things that inspire you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Certainly my colleagues and my friends who are again following their passion, and it's taken them in various paths in music, and some have gone in different directions of music. So I'm constantly inspired by them. I'm definitely inspired by my students, and I learn so much as we all do who teach. We learn so much from our students. I feel like I'm 1,000 times the pianist, technically and musically, than I was before I started to teach seriously. Just have learned so much. So they constantly inspire me. I think some of the, I was having this conversation with friends the other day that we, for quite a few years now, with the rise of YouTube and the accessibility of online, so many of our students will just, when they need to listen to a recording of something, they'll go to YouTube and find the first available thing, which is not always the most reliable. But I think some of the young artists that have come up now, like Yoon Chan Lim, who won the Clyburn, are, I think, the old soul in him, and in some of the other young artists, but I hear it especially in him, inspires me for sure. That just classy reverence for beauty, and the composer's essence, tapping into that and infusing your own personality, but having such respect for style and the composer's essence, definitely inspires me. And I'm so glad that is now going to be the default recording of some things that our students will click on and have that influence.
Yes. So what's next for you? You've climbed so many mountaintops, and you're young and have so many great years ahead. What are some of the next exciting things?
Well, it's kind of an interesting multi-layered story about my solo repertoire right now. I'm extremely, as a self-choice, I'm extremely overloaded with students this year, because last year at IUU I started a whole bunch of first years, masters and undergrads and everything, and nobody graduated. So I took on a few more students that I really wanted this year. Very overloaded, and I knew I would have very minimal practice time. So all this season, I've been playing all 24 Debussy preludes, because this is some of my most comfortable repertoire. This past summer was the first time I played both books together, but I had played both books individually many, many, many times. So I knew it's stuff that I could play in my sleep, and because I would have minimal practice time this year, being overloaded with students. So I've been playing all the Debussy preludes, and it's been a major joy just to play them over and over again and just be re-immersed in that color world. And I've always gravitated toward French music because it's just so fun to be a painter at the piano. So, and I think I played Children's Corner on the Francis Clark recital, actually. Yeah. So that's been a wonderful project, and people are reacting really well to it. So I think I'm going to keep them for another season and take them around to places. And I'm recording, I've done a few wonderful, very just deeply satisfying recordings with this great cellist in Cleveland who plays in the Cleveland Orchestra, Brian Thornton. We've done the two Brahms sonatas. We've done Debussy Sonata and Brahms Trio with the principal clarinet of Cleveland Orchestra, and also the complete Schumann works. So this June, we're going to do Chopin and Rachmaninoff sonatas.
Oh, fabulous.
which will be great. And he's rented Severance Hall for the recording, which is just, of course, one of my childhood places and one of the greatest halls in the world. So I have that coming up. Next year, I think it's for sure. Now we're sort of nailing down a date. But before the pandemic, I was did a couple times the Bernstein Complete Anniversaries with his daughter Jamie narrating.
Oh, wow.
And she has an unbelievable collection of slides that she couples with that have to do with all of the people that he dedicated the anniversaries to, his colleagues and friends and family and everything. So I think we're going to do it at IU. It's almost set for next March, 2025. To have her come, and Bernstein spent a decent amount of time at IU for various things, and so she knows IU and loves IU. So I think it's going to be a good restart to that project. We were supposed to do it at Ravinia right before COVID shut everything down, so hopefully we'll be able to get it going at more places because I love that music and I love her, and she's just the interactive presentation that we're able to do with that program is so engaging for everybody, and so that's something upcoming as well.
That all sounds absolutely fabulous.
Thank
I want
you.
to come to all of it.
Yes.
And experience all of it. It just sounds so amazing.
Yes.
And isn't it wonderful that you're now coming back to the Cleveland Orchestra?
Yes.
Since that was the place that
Yes.
you started.
Absolutely.
That's where the flame exploded.
Yes.
And here you are making a recording
Here I
in
am.
that hall
Yep.
with musicians
I
from
know.
the symphony.
I know. It's true.
I mean, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
We could do many more of these together.
Yes.
It's
yes.
been wonderful.
And we should. Yes.
We will. We like to end this with one statement that we'd love for you to complete. Piano inspires.
Inspires the heart. Piano inspires the heart.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Spencer. What an
Thank you.
honor and absolute joy. I'm so
Likewise.
inspired by you right now. It's hard to
Oh, I
believe we're
love
sitting
it.
in chairs. We should be jumping around. We're so
Thank you,
excited.
Jennifer.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
The Francis Clark Center is a not-for-profit educational organization that serves the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing. Divisions include Piano Magazine, Piano Inspires Kids, Journal for Piano Research, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, the New School for Music Study, Piano Education Press, International Online Teacher Education, and PianoInspires Online Community Hub. Please visit us at PianoInspires.com to learn more about our impactful work and inspiring community.